Hey everyone, I'm Norm. Welcome to Breaking Back, a tennis podcast by fans, for fans, covering all aspects of the game with an unfiltered lens. And I'm here with my co-hosts, Peter and Chris. Welcome to Breaking Back.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Breaking Back, presented by Lone Pine Brewing Company and their new Juice Punch Hazy IPA, now available in all distribution markets. Visit lonepinebrewery.com to find it nearby.
So last time we were together, it was Australian Open time, and I think it'd be good to just put the lid on that tournament before we move on to our guests. The biggest takeaway, obviously, aside from the match, the men's side, Djokovic losing, and Sabalenka winning, is how about Nick Kyrgios in the TV booth?
He's a natural. I think it was an unexpected. It was either a very well placed and planned accident, or it was an accident that they decided to. But they kept him in the booth for the entire tournament. I don't know if that was planned or if that was just from crowd support. But he was very comfortable. He was incredibly entertaining. He gave a perspective that the other presenters can't give. He had access to the players that the other presenters don't have. His love of Djokovic is a little annoying at times, but that's the only thing that bothered me about him.
I think he stole the show. I thought he was incredible. Certainly his accent helps, and I certainly prefer to hear Australian announcers when watching the Australian Open. I'm surprised how many Americans are on the court post-match, like Jim Courier doing the post-match interview. He's a complete natural. I completely agree. I enjoyed him so much. I actually wanted to find out which shows he was calling because he provides a whole nother lens and perspective. He knows every single player's coach. He's played against every single one of these players. And he provided intel that I thought I heard McEnroe and Chris Fowler sort of backpedaling like, wow, this guy knows 10 times more than we do. He would say, he would say to McEnroe, oh, isn't his coach so-and-so who did this? And McEnroe was like, if you say so. I mean, I think he really, I don't want to say they made them look bad, but he really shined. And I was extremely impressed, and I would literally seek him out as a broadcaster.
I tell you what, whatever money Eurosport paid him to do those broadcasts is the best money spent in all of broadcasting sports, because it probably wasn't very much. And you know that they're paying McEnroe a huge contract to do those games. And it was game, set, and match, the quality over Kyrgios' commentary versus McEnroe's. And it wasn't because I don't like McEnroe. It was what McEnroe exposed his lack of knowing the players, and he's gotten lazy. He's gotten really lazy.
I also think it's another demographic, right? He's younger. Obviously, he's wearing his hoodies. He's wearing his Chicago Bulls hats and his Celtics. I mean, I like everything about him. I mean, he's fearlessly himself, and obviously he could give. He's no fucks given, right?
And they show McEnroe on the street in New York a week after the Australian, and he's wearing his signature Nike Attack shoes, a long overcoat, chains outside of his T-shirt. I'm sure it's not too far from what he wears on a daily basis, but I have actually seen him in New York City. He was always a coat and tie guy, but I think he's trying to stay relevant.
And Kyrgios just waxed him his first opportunity. Almost the same thing he did like with the players he played for the first time. He beat them all.
And he wasn't trying. He was just being himself, which was so nice.
This whole thing is not just a lark, right? He launched his own podcast series. We'll see if he does better than Breaking Back, called Good Trouble. And but the hosts he's had are really interesting, very eclectic. He had Gordon Ramsay, Jamel Hill, Francis Tiafoe, there's a tennis player, Rainn Wilson, Gary Vaynerchuk, Mike Tyson, and Naomi Osaka.
That's his podcast? I thought he was on somebody else's podcast.
No, that's his own podcast.
Oh, so he basically he's got an agent that's actually making their...
Yeah, I mean, listen, Kyrgios is the greatest talent on the planet. I think he'll probably never play or do well in a slam again because he's got this great life he's carving out for himself. We can make more money with doing less, work on the court in the gym by way of media. Why wouldn't you?
And not have the mental health issues and the mental health stress.
I was just going to say,
which has obviously been his downfall.
Right.
He doesn't have to worry about turning into a complete asshole.
He was by far my biggest takeaway from the Australian Open. The other two, for me personally, were the comebacks. And I think being the football guy that I am, it's sort of been a theme of late. You saw the Detroit Lions throttle the San Francisco 49ers in the first half, and then halftime adjustment, the 49ers came back and ended up winning that. Same thing in the Super Bowl. I think the 49ers were the much better team in the first half.
The NFL would never let the 49ers win that game. They had to complete the Cinderella story. Let's go. Come on.
But the point I'm trying to make is comebacks. I think in the semis, right, Medvedev was down 2-0 to Zverev and came back to beat him, which I looked it up. You have a 1 in 17 chance of winning a match, and I'm not sure if that's the Australian Open. I think it's just at the professional level. If you're down 2-0, you have a 1 in 17 chance of actually coming back. And then lo and behold, Sinner did the same thing to Medvedev in the actual finals. And I think there's a much bigger conversation there about all that has to happen. Stakes are at their highest, and not only does one player have to sort of shit the bed, so to speak, the other player has to overcome all odds, right? And
I think Sinner did the tennis version of the rope-a-dope.
No way.
I think he did. I think he let Medvedev, because you saw how Medvedev came out of the gate like a crazy, insane, rabid bull. And he destroyed him in that first set. And I think he gassed him. I think he let him. I think he knew. I think his coaches told him, let him like waste all this energy and all this gas. Sit back, let him beat the crap out of you, and then about halfway through the second set, let it go.
That's a great. I mean, maybe. I don't know.
I think that's what he did, because Sinner's got the advantage. He's younger, and you know that he's got the fitness over Medvedev. And he smoked his ass by the end of the game. He was smoking his ass.
You have to take on the attitude.
Walk. He was so tired.
You have nothing to lose, right? When you're down 2-0.
But think about how tired Medvedev was.
Mental shift of your attitude and your body language. And, you saw it a little bit with Alcaraz. Unfortunately, he sort of petered out a little bit early. But I thought the comebacks were, for me, a takeaway. As I was telling you all earlier, I tried to look up how many there were in the tournament, and I couldn't find it. But it's interesting to find out how many folks are coming back down 2-0. And then my last takeaway was the fashion. I love seeing, as does my better half, what these players are wearing. Sponsors tell them what they're going to wear. Same thing in golf. They actually have, here are the exact outfits you're going to be wearing for the respective matches or golf tournaments. Everyone was wearing yellow and green. It was all yellows and greens. So much so, I looked up the color. Is this the Pantone color of the year? Some form of yellow or green. And there's electric green, electricity green. There's key lime pie green. I mean, there was every shade of yellow and green you could see.
But green and yellow, not coincidentally, is the color of Australia. Like if they compete in Davis Cup or the Olympics, they wear green and yellow.
Did you guys notice the same thing? It was all greens and
totally.
yellows, especially Adidas. Adidas was straight yellow.
I have something to say about fashion in general with tennis, and it actually connects, Eric, into this part of the podcast. I think that sleeveless shirts for the men's side should be banned. I don't need to see a man's arms. Not only do I think it looks like total shit, but on top of it, they're denying themselves sponsorship opportunities.
They have no inventory.
They have no inventory for their arms.
That's critical real estate.
It's critical real estate.
Yeah.
You're like, and Alcaraz, because he plays for Nike, can do that and do the sleeveless thing because Nike owns everything that he wears.
So Manarino should be sleeveless because he doesn't have any sponsors. Did you see him? He looks like he's wearing a t-shirt.
He wore
hiking
wears like
shorts.
Viore clothing that people wear to go hiking or something.
But what would be really funny though is if you had one of these idiots who's is sleeveless and have them put tattoos on their arms for their sponsor.
Marcus Giron just finished the semis and wearing that exact outfit. He is sponsored by Viore, and he wears the sleeveless tank, and he's jacked, so he wants to show off the guns. Suns out, guns out with Marcus.
I get it. I understand. It's it restricts the movement. Whatever. It looks like shit. At least it's not the 70s when the guys looked like gorillas and with the hairy arms and the whole thing. That was really bad.
I enjoy the fashion, though, is what I'm trying to say. The fashion and the trends and what the players are wearing or not wearing. Their collab shoes. In the case of Coco
Is
Gauff.
Wimbledon the only tournament that demands a white kit?
Yeah.
Straight white, yeah.
Do you have to have a collared shirt or just a white kit?
They've relaxed the standards where now, as long as it's white, You don't have to
You don't
wear
have to have a collar, but it has to
Right.
be white.
But there were the women last year. One of the bigger deals was women had to wear white undergarments, and it was very stressful because a certain time of the month, women would be menstruating, and they did not want to have to.
Oh, I remember that. Yes.
Be shamed about that during their matches. And so this past year, for the first time ever,
They said they could wear
they
black
could wear
or whatever.
black or different colors.
Huh.
Undergarments.
Undergarments, yeah.
Huh.
Think about that. 2024, before they could wear non-white underpants.
Welcome back to Breaking Bad, presented by Lone
Whoa, you
Pine.
said Breaking Bad.
Breaking Back? Did I say bad? Shit. Welcome back to Breaking Back. Welcome back to Breaking Bad. Well, welcome back to Breaking Back, presented by Lone Pine Brewing Company and their new Juice Punch Hazy IPA.
Oh, yeah. It feels
Thank you,
good
Lone Pine.
running down my hands.
You know what I love about Lone Pine is that they're not afraid about a cease and desist letter from the Wrigley Company.
Right. Yeah. Juicy Fruit Punch.
Juice Punch Hazy IPA. This is,
That'll drink.
yeah.
That's tasty.
This is tasty.
Does it have like a fruity? Yeah. Here's the guy coming up on 18 years of sobriety on the podcast.
That's good
with
beer
the
right
beer
there.
sponsor.
It is good beer. It's
Really good.
It is a little bit on the sweeter side.
It's also not overpowering. I
not.
think it's...
It's a very drinkable IPA, which living in Maine, right, is sometimes hard to do because there's a lot of like funky shit that's they push here, which is phenomenal. But you want an IPA you can drink in the summer on your boat, maybe watching a little tennis.
We're going to start with our first guest ever on Breaking Back. And so we're going to set the bar pretty high, and it's going to be all downhill from here. But there's a gentleman from St. Clair, Michigan, who's become a good friend over the last few years, who is the president of Apex Marketing Group. He sort of focuses on sports sponsorship and analytics services, film and TV product placement analysis, as well as NIL sales and analytics. He most recently has reported on the Lionel Messi effect at Inter Miami FC, I believe. The Pop-Tarts Bowl and all their earned media that they received from their bowl naming rights sponsorship. And most recently, the Taylor Swift effect and the brand value of more than $330 million on the NFL Kansas City Chiefs and the league. Without further ado, welcome our first guest, Eric Smallwood, president of Apex Marketing Group. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you, Peter.
I'd love to know a little bit about your background and kind of how you found yourself as this army of one, incredible amount of knowledge in connecting brands and the events that they are a part of. What's your background and how'd you get into this business?
Well, way back when I did an internship, which I recommend to any students, college, high school, right out of college or still within college with the Detroit Tigers. That got me into sports. And then I parlayed that into my first job. Real job was working for an analytics firm in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And that firm was kind of the godfather of sponsorship analytics back to the mid 80s, where they got their feet wet in auto racing. So a lot of heads turning around in circles trying to track sponsors with the various oval races, NASCAR, IndyCar. Back then it was kart. Got into that and then learned the business side of the sponsorship evaluation side of the business. And then in early 2001, I landed with a company out in Philadelphia that really focused on sponsorships, selling sponsorships, naming rights. And they really needed an asset of an evaluation component to help their clients, marry sponsorship brands with various sports venues, arenas, stadiums, even convention centers. So I came on board, worked there for about 14 years. And then about 9 years ago this May, I started Apex in 2015. You talk about I like to say a Navy of one due to my military background. It's very much working as a contractor and working with a lot of subcontractors. So any of the work we do, we have a lot of partners in the mix. So that's where we get Apex Marketing Group, because we bring people together. Really, we have a client need and we figure out how to fit the mold and and, answer the question is what is the value of something if it gets into evaluations. And we also sell on the other side, another silo of business, selling sponsorships, naming rights.
Just to show how powerful those jersey sponsorships are, I worked for the Columbus Crew, quick story, and I gave a bunch of jerseys to my nieces and nephews. And Barbasol at the time was the jersey sponsor, and they called the team the Barbasols. They thought that was the name of the team.
Right.
So you just never know. It's pretty, same thing like Liverpool used to have Carlsberg. Yeah, Man United always had Aon, I believe it is. Now Chevrolet. Those are some pretty powerful sponsorships.
Speaking of sponsorship, so one of our things that we like to talk about here on the podcast, Eric, is watches, or at least I talk about it a lot.
You talk about watches a lot, yeah.
And these guys look at me funny, but there's a particular association of watch companies and tennis, and I'm just curious if you can shed any light on that in terms of sponsorship, or why, apart from the obvious demographic reasons, but if there's a particular reason why it seems, the minute the match is over, the player's running for their bag to put on the watch before the trophy ceremony, and what all that just means from a sponsorship perspective.
Sure. You see it in auto racing too, where you'll see watch brands that you never even heard of from some European country. And that's key for the race car drivers, just as it is with tennis. You're not going to wear a watch in a tennis match because it's going to be cumbersome, not to mention when you try to wipe the sweat from your forehead, you cut yourself. So ideally I'm a tennis player. I want to get a watch sponsorship. Well, I got to show value. So it's probably contracted of when they put it on, when they're seen wearing it, types of events leading up to it that are non-tennis events. So it's crucial. It's crucial for the brand association to be affiliated with a particular tennis player. That's why they're spending the big sponsorships. I assume that some of those brands are also getting promotional aspects, so they're using likeness and logo and everything of the player in their brand campaigns. So it's, that's the best way they're going to get value, is when they win and they show it, and our watch is worn by a winner.
Eric, let me ask you, as someone who's worked a lot on TV and film, particularly in regards to product placement for brands. We've talked about, I think, Yellowstone in the past with the Bullet Bourbons and the Tecovas boots and the Dodge trucks, et cetera. We want to ask you about Netflix and their series, and in particular in regards to tennis, Breakpoint. I think years ago, whether it was 5 or 6 years ago now, the series Drive to Survive, I think, single-handedly changed the viewership and opened up a whole new demographic for Formula One racing. And I can speak to that directly as my better half, who's never seen a minute of racing, is now following every single Formula One racer and can tell you exactly what Lewis Hamilton is wearing, before the race and after the race, etc. Shed some light for us on the Netflix series Breakpoint and the impact it's had on sport, and in particular tennis and its viewership, and the sentiment and the growing engagement.
Yeah, I think, Netflix has done a good job with their series. They have golf, Formula One, as you mentioned. The Kentucky Derby has one coming out. And what Breakpoint did is it introduced tennis to, obviously, tennis fans, but it introduced it to non-tennis fans. It created a really good perspective on various personalities within the series. Was it as successful as Formula One? Probably not, but as Netflix is not so forthcoming of their viewership information, what I did find out is it was probably viewed by the numbers that I was able to get from the Netflix side. It was about 4 million viewers across the 9 or 10 episodes. So I think from that perspective, 4 million doesn't sound like a lot, but it was a real good introduction to tennis to non-tennis fans, and that can drive viewership in the future.
I wonder, that's probably not enough for a third season, but maybe.
Second season's already out, right?
Yeah, the second season's out. The first 4 episodes, I think, are already out, and then they'll do another chunk later. And just subjectively, I'm an opinion of one, but I do think that the second season has started off better than the first one. My only issue with it is it's not timely enough, right? As a tennis fan, right, you're watching, season 2 is about Wimbledon from 2023. And so it's, if you know the storylines, you know what happened in the matches, you know what happened with the people in between the matches, it's a little stale. But Eric, how do they are they able to kind of glean from their viewership? Are they moving the needle with the non-tennis fan? How would they determine that to inform whether they do a season 3, or are there other sponsorship opportunities that are being, supported by the show? Like what data would they need to parse to tell that story?
Well, it's, and Netflix is unique. It's not rated like network television or cable or even cable television. It's very closely held with Netflix. The data I have seen out there for streaming services like Netflix is really good perspective on the user base, whether it's age demographic, socioeconomic demographic across the board. So there's a lot of good details in that. They can even they may even be triangulating it down to certain markets. Is it big in Florida where tennis is big? Is it big in the U.S. Open market, in the New York metro market, in the major markets? So how they're looking at it, I'm not sure. 4 million doesn't sound from a network show, it'd be a canceled show. The network universe or base is over 120 million.
Speaking of Nielsen, Chris, actually, you brought it to our attention last week that Sinclair Broadcasting is putting the Tennis Channel on the block to sell, which immediately begs the question, is it a distressed sale? Are they just trying to get out quickly? Or are they selling at the top of the market? They think, I don't know, like what are they thinking? Or what do you think they're thinking? Maybe is a better question.
I think that it's part of my quick answer, and then I'm going to pass to Eric. Tennis has too long and difficult of a schedule to attach a broadcast capability to it to make it profitable.
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the biggest challenges, right? In trying to take, it's like
well, we've talked about it just in terms of injury and player ability and longevity in the sport. The season starts in January and goes till, they have
December,
34 days off. Is that the number?
Right.
And there's so many different tournaments. Like I was looking at all the different tournaments that happen in February from when Australian stops, and then Indian Wells, which is the biggest tournament that has a name after the Australian. And that's not until March. But these guys are going all over the place, playing tournaments in Dubai is it Dubai?
Yeah, Dubai,
Qatar,
Doha, right? And Qatar,
Saudi Arabia, Rotterdam.
Yeah.
They're going all over the place. Now, if you're a broadcaster, that's a nightmare. That's expensive, flying people around, or you subcontract with local broadcasters, and then you have to deal with rights and all that. And so I'm sure it just from a sponsorship perspective, and then the languages and culture, you can't, advertising in that many markets is not easy. You have to localize things to a certain degree, and that's become much, much easier with AI, but it's still very hard from a branding perspective. Coke doesn't sell the same way here as it does here. They don't sell it the same way. That's why they have polar bears. It's like everybody knows what a polar bear is.
It's a Bowdoin mascot.
Tennis Channel says we're going to broadcast every tennis tournament. And the rights fees, the camera crew. Right now, let me segue into sports betting, where that could be a strong point for the Tennis Channel's longevity. Right now, I can wake up tomorrow morning and watch matches in Doha and bet on that. Obviously, in Michigan, you can bet. You can't bet in Maine. But it's sports betting could be an aspect that allows the channel to grow if you like betting on tennis and watching tennis. What I can tell you about the viewership, historically, their best viewership that I was able to find was the 22 French Open, and it generated about 660,000 in viewers. That was Nadal against Djokovic. Overall, they're averaging 57,000 viewers a week. That's their average weekly audience published number, 57,000.
Wow. The math doesn't work. Economics don't work.
Yeah, the economics aren't going to work. They're going to be stronger viewers during the majors for sure, because they're going to pick up those smaller matches if the rights allow them. Like they did with the French Open. But overall, how can you sustain that from an advertising standpoint? It's all about dots and eyeballs with advertisers. How many impressions am I going to get? And that's not a great CPM when you get into selling advertising.
And I wonder if, because of the Saudis' interest, right, and the amount of money they're throwing at tennis,
It's also the internet too. I mean, look at what Eurosport does just by simply having a strong presence in social media. They kill everybody. Then they're already there because they're taking the local feeds from everything, resending it out. I mean, that's the problem with, what a lot of, I mean, that's what's killed legacy media. And then it's killed the cable channels that can't keep up with streamers.
But if the Saudis, as an example, get involved and come up with their own network, and then they buy a tour, build a tour, control 12, 14 events a year, everything else goes to syndicate or internet or something,
Sure.
Then you can actually build an audience around a month-to-month kind of tour where there's anticipation, right? There's a storyline, there's narrative, there's a fit for like a break point to be almost, behind the scenes, counterbalance to the live action, right? Maybe Sinclair's seeing that writing on the wall is like, we're out before the Saudis push us out.
Are the Saudis looking to have a signature event or an actual tour?
Yeah, so there's two things that they're doing. One is they've just bought the rights to the WTA's year-end event. Charlotte was bidding on it, and then the next day the Saudis announced that they got it. And then they are putting on an event in, I think, September or October called like the Six Kings, and it's the top, like, most marketable 6 players in the world, and they're going to be playing off for some ridiculous amount of money. And they found a window in the tour. Well, and what they're going to do is, I guess there's a rule that you can't have, between events, you can't have 3 consecutive days of tennis in a row or something like that. So they're basically going to let them play for 2 days, take a day off, then play. And that's how they're getting around like the TV/tour rights. But this is going to happen this year. So there's 2 major events that they're going to influence.
Is it just men's? It's called
24.
Six Kings, or is it men's and women's tennis? I wonder.
It's just men.
Okay.
That particular one.
Eric, what were you going to say?
So I did some work about 12 years ago. I did some work in Abu Dhabi. And Abu Dhabi is same climate as Saudi Arabia. They would bring all of the tennis players on the way to the Australian, and they would play, and I think they're still doing it today. It's an outdoor event. It does not sell out. This is Abu Dhabi, and anytime you're outdoors, doesn't matter what time of year, it's hot. And they were just, Djokovic came there. It was big names would come there, and it would be their stopover practice, basically, to get to Australia. So that's very conceivable in that time frame to lead it, as you make your way over to Australia.
Well, I think
another thing about Sinclair is this is all the networks that Sinclair owned that were had deals with teams. I don't know if this channel has a deal specifically with the ATP or the WTA.
I don't think they do.
They don't have a rights fee.
Yeah, I don't.
No.
So it's a piece of inventory they can dump, but they're not handcuffed by a rights fee that's a stranglehold on them.
Season's too long. I mean, it's just. You can't keep up with the sport for 330 days. I can't believe
they need to have one
layoff.
organization they need their one FIFA. But they have 2. So
No, they have multiple. It's like they have
more than
7
2.
plus different, tours that they. Well, getting back to the relationship between players and brands, I'm obsessed with X, formerly known as Twitter. I've been on it since day one. I always told people I thought it'd be more valuable than Facebook. I'm not sure that that's accurate, but I'm obsessed. Tennis Twitter is just a very interesting place to live. Stars like Djokovic in particular are leveraging their Serbian fan base to support them, to promote them, to be on the front line in social media. And I'm just wondering, what, if any, relationships exist between, say, a Djokovic and a guy like Pavi G, who's the one Twitter guy that it's almost like he has bots of himself. He tweets every 15 minutes something about Djokovic and how great he is, or about how, tawdry Nadal or Federer is for some reason. It's just, but I wonder, is there a formal relationship, or is it just simpatico?
I think they have social media marketing firms that are connected with their PR firm. And I think
Djokovic has 9 million followers on Twitter.
Yeah, which is it's large, but it's nothing compared to
I think
LeBron
the 3 of us.
I
think the 3 of us
Messi.
have probably also spent a fair amount of our time trolling a fair portion of those fans for no other reason than
You get a response.
It's poking the bear. You get a major response.
Yeah. But how does that move the needle for Djokovic and his 9 million followers? Or, I mean, obviously he's probably the most highly compensated tennis player at the moment, but what does he do to leverage, if anything, his fans that are so crazily supporting him?
Well, and just for note is Federer has 12 million and Nadal has 15 million. The key is content, and content isn't in anything. I mean, the Tennis Channel runs into content. Content's king. It's always giving your fans something fresh and new. If you don't post anything for a while, people are going to tune you out. So that's so important to keep that connection with your fans. Like you're giving the fans a behind the scenes approach. A particular musician has done that very well that you mentioned at the top of the conversation was Taylor Swift and how she has been able, I mean, things were organic in the Swifties, but I don't know if there's going to be the Jokies to come out and create something, but good news, bad news. I mean, Djokovic has had some bad press in the last 4 years, especially around the Australian, and that boosted, people were talking about him on Twitter, whether it was good or bad. But I think it's content. I mean, you look at Nadal, he's got something posted within the last 5 days. It's relative, and that's where I think this is important. Whether they're doing it themselves, and like I think Chris, you mentioned, they've got their bots or they got their team, their PR team. I think that's crucial just to give them content.
I think Djokovic, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I think his performance in the Australian Open, and we can get more into this in the podcast, but I think he's on the way out. I think we've seen the best of him. Yeah, agreed. And I think that's why he's starting to work on his image to the public a bit more, because he knows he has to be more acceptable and more likable, or he's not going to have any future. He's going to turn into Jimmy Connors.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good observation for sure. I mean, he lost that match in pretty, I mean, Sinner spanked him pretty well, right?
Spanked him
and
big time.
Immediately after the match, during the match, even if you're following on social, it's like Djokovic is not well. He's got a stomach virus.
He had his
right?
wrist injury.
There's the wrist injury, but I thought it was fantastic that about a week or so later, his coach, Goran Ivanisevic, came on and said, he denied all reports of him being unwell. And he said, quote, sooner or later he had to lose. We were all aware of that. So to your point, I think it's like, hey, he's human. And honestly, that makes it more interesting the next time he plays, too. The fact that he lost this
I'm not going to count him out. I think he's an amazing athlete, and he'll have a couple more huge wins, I'm sure. I'm not putting a prediction on how many more seasons he's going to be in the game, but I don't think he's the dominant force anymore.
We were doing some pre-show planning, and you sent us some interesting data about some players you were tracking for some brands at the U.S. Open. How did that come together? I mean, you don't have to get into the details of your relationship with the brands or whoever reached out to you, but how did that come together, and what did they get out of the work you did on behalf of them and leveraging the shirts that those women were wearing?
So what happened, without getting into brands or anything, but what happens is there's an available inventory that can be sold day of a match. That's a very valuable piece of inventory if you're playing Serena Williams, for instance, and you get a again, depending when they do the draws, then you'll know if you're playing a particular person. I mean, it's ideal, and it's done on the fly. It's a quick sell from a sponsorship standpoint. But what the evaluation does is just validates that spend for that particular brand. So now next year, Open comes around and there's available inventory. And this happens every year. It's not necessarily the same players, but it's the prime time show. It's going to have the best viewership. The storyline is there. So it's on-demand selling essentially for sponsorships.
Yeah, Isla Tomljanovic, right? She had the unenviable position of having to play Serena in the U.S. Open last year and beat her, right? You could almost feel her feeling bad taking out Serena in her last match professionally and in the tournament, but she got a lot of coverage because of that one match, right? I mean, she was featured prominently in Breakpoint. it sounds like she was able to take advantage of just-in-time inventory, which is, I think, is an amazing thing that you're describing. How did that come about, or how does that work with you as the broker? If I don't even know if that's the right term, but between the athlete and the brand, like how are you made aware of this inventory? I mean, I understand how ad inventory works in the digital marketing space, but this is people.
Yeah, this is not. So we're the analytics side of this business. This piece, we're not selling the sponsorship. So it does keep a division between the evaluation and the sales. So this is not something we sold.
Got it.
The agency that sold this came to us and says, "We've got these patches located. Keep an eye out for it," and then we track it from the data that comes in. And this is not unusual for other sports. We're actually on our sales side. We're doing this with the Kentucky Derby and the Triple Crown. When you get into horses, a lot of times you don't know if the jockeys are going to even be riding a particular horse until days before the Derby or the Belmont or the Preakness. And there has to be available inventory. PGA is doing it now. They've done it. They tested it last year. They've done it. They did it. I think they had 25 different golfers just for Sunday at the Waste Management event have a Smart Water patch on their logo that they would not have otherwise had.
The most recent WM Open?
Yep.
Yeah.
The infamous one?
That's Jay Monahan.
The wasted
That's
management
all Jay Monahan.
Open?
Yeah.
But so I'm a player. I show up. I don't have sponsor. I have some sponsorship, but last minute somebody approaches me and says, "Hey, do you want to wear this particular brand?" and makes that connection, and then you're there to capture it.
My guess is a business agent makes the decision, works with the agency, and the agency says, "Okay, I can bring 3 brands, 4 brands to you. Here are the brands I can bring. Are you interested?" And then they just kind of blanket them. It's a fire sale in a sense too, because it's not a long-term partnership. It's a one-match partnership. Some cases a little further. You also see strategically placed hats on the coaches for this as well. Most coaches will wear a hat for the brand, and that's part of the thing. So it's probably a coach/agent deal that gets to the players, and then you just got to make sure you get it on the uniform.
What do you do to substantiate the numbers you come up with?
Well, I mean, it's the data, and I can use an old term, but reams and reams of data. It's Excel sheets, but the amount of data, I share that with the client.
Yeah, you show them the raw materials and say, "Hey, this is
raw material," but also how we get to the value and how the value is attributed to if it was a TV exposure versus a digital exposure versus a social media exposure. So to discuss that with the methodology, be upfront about the methodology, and just say, "Here's how we're evaluating this. We're even going to look at it from a straight line factor or location factor. So there's 2 ways to factor it. Then, we're going to look at it from all these different media hits. And you're telling me you got 10 billion impressions. Okay, what service determined that? And then let's look at the data." But I pulled the data myself. It's what one of our specialties is getting the data, obtaining the data, but also evaluating the data appropriately. And that's viewership, readership, listenership.
Right. You're collecting it yourself. You're not relying on another third-party service to do it for you.
Correct.
This has been great, Eric. We learned a lot in the conversation.
Thank you very much.
And we'll certainly be looking for you popping up elsewhere on TV and beyond, and hopefully in this new world of tennis in 2024.
Yeah, I think you just need Taylor Swift to go to a U.S. Open, a couple U.S. Open matches, and viewership will be off the charts.
Swifties and the Jokies.
Yeah. There you go. Some better-looking tennis players than Travis Kelce, I think. All right, next time we'll be chatting about Indian Wells, Miami Open, and the run-up to the French Open. The clay court season starts in Europe in April. At some point, the Breaking Back podcast team will have to do a trip to Spain, Italy, and France. I mean, there's just no way around it. All right, to Lone Pine.
Juice Punch.
And Juice Punch.
India Pale Ale.
Very drinkable, very enjoyable.
Very, very nice beer.
Yes.
Nice work, Lone Pine.
All right.
Visit lonepinebrewery.com to find it nearby.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to Breaking Back on your favorite podcast platform. And be sure to follow us on X and Instagram at Breaking Back Pod.